In the sweltering summer of 1790, as the fragile United States teetered on the brink of financial collapse, with unpaid Revolutionary War veterans rioting, worthless state debts threatening to tear the Union apart, and foreign creditors laughing at America's credit, one bold Treasury Secretary and a secret dinner party among three founding fathers pulled off the most astonishing financial miracle in history, turning crushing debt into the very foundation of American power. Hello everyone, and a warm welcome to all my fellow Americans, history lovers, patriots, and anyone who's ever wondered how the United States became the economic superpower of the world. Whether you're watching from New York, Virginia, California, or anywhere across this great nation, thank you for joining me today. Grab your coffee, settle in, and get ready for an epic, true historical story that feels like a Hollywood thriller, but is 100% real. Today, we're diving deep into the Assumption of State Debts, 1790, Alexander Hamilton's plan for the federal government to take over state debts, establishing American credit. This isn't just dry history. This is a gripping tale of genius, betrayal, backroom deals, desperate soldiers, fiery debates, and one dinner that literally saved the Republic. Let's travel back to the chaotic birth of our nation. The year was 1789. The ink on the new Constitution was barely dry. George Washington had just been sworn in as the first president under the new government, and the United States was a fragile collection of 13 quarreling states, not yet a true nation. The Revolutionary War had ended 6 years earlier, but its scars ran deep. America had won its independence at a staggering cost, over $77 million in combined federal and state debts. That was an astronomical sum for a new country with no real tax system, no national bank, and almost no credit abroad. Soldiers who had fought at Valley Forge and Yorktown were still waiting for their promised pay. Many had sold their certificates, called certificates, to desperate speculators for pennies on the dollar just to feed their families. Farmers in Massachusetts had risen up in Shays' Rebellion just 3 years earlier, furious over crushing taxes and foreclosures. The young republic was bankrupt in every sense except the legal one. Enter Alexander Hamilton, brilliant, ambitious, and utterly convinced that America's future depended on sound finances. Born in the Caribbean, orphaned young, and risen through sheer intellect, Hamilton had served as Washington's aide-de-camp during the war. Now, at just 34 years old, Washington had appointed him the first Secretary of the Treasury. Hamilton looked at the chaos and saw not ruin, but opportunity. In his mind, the mountain of debt wasn't a curse, it was raw material to forge a strong, unified nation. His radical idea? The federal government should assume, that is, take over all the states' Revolutionary War debts, consolidate them into one national debt, and pay it off at full face value. This single bold stroke, he believed, would establish unshakable American credit worldwide, bind the states together economically, and create a powerful central government capable of funding roads, armies, and future growth. By January 9, 1790, Hamilton delivered his famous first report on the public credit to Congress. In it, he laid out the full plan with breathtaking detail. Fund the entire federal debt at par, meaning pay back every penny plus interest to whoever held the certificates now. Assume the roughly $25 million in state debts and pay for it all through new tariffs on imports and excise taxes on whiskey and other goods. He argued passionately that honoring debts, even to speculators, was essential for honor and future borrowing. The debt of the United States was the price of liberty. But the plan was explosive. Southern states like Virginia and North Carolina had already paid down much of their own debts through heavy taxes on their citizens. Why should they now be taxed again to bail out northern states like Massachusetts and South Carolina, whose debts were still huge? Worse, many certificates had been bought up cheaply by wealthy northern investors. Screams that Hamilton's plan was a giveaway to rich speculators at the expense of ordinary farmers and veterans. James Madison, Hamilton's former Federalist Papers ally and now a leading congressman from Virginia, led the opposition in the House. He demanded discrimination, paying original holders, the soldiers, something extra. The debates turned vicious. The Union seemed ready to fracture. Southern states threatened to withhold support for the new government. Northern merchants warned of economic collapse. Foreign lenders in London and Amsterdam refused new loans, calling American paper not worth the parchment it was written on. Washington watched anxiously from the president's house. Hamilton paced his office at night, drafting letter after letter. The crisis was so severe that many feared the Constitution itself would collapse before it even got started.
Then came the moment that still astonishes historians today, the secret dinner that changed everything. Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State and a Virginian through and through, had just returned from France. He hated the idea of a powerful central government and distrusted Hamilton's financial schemes. But Jefferson was also a pragmatist who loved good food and conversation. On a warm June evening, he hosted a small dinner at his rented mansion on Maiden Lane in New York City. The guests? Alexander Hamilton and James Madison. Over wine, roast beef, and Jefferson's famous French-style vegetables, the three men struck one of the most consequential bargains in American history. Hamilton, desperate, offered to use his influence to move the permanent national capital from its temporary home in the north to the Potomac River, a location dear to Southern hearts and close to Virginia. In return, Madison agreed to stop blocking the Assumption Bill and deliver enough Southern votes to get it passed. Jefferson later called it a bargain that saved the Union. The very next day, the pieces began falling into place. The Residence Act passed first, placing the capital on the Potomac, what would become Washington, D.C. Then, on August 4, 1790, the Assumption Act sailed through Congress by a narrow margin. The federal government assumed approximately $18 million in state debts, the final figure after adjustments. Combined with the federal debt, the total national debt now stood at around $80 million. But now it was one unified, fully funded obligation backed by the entire United States. The results were nothing short of miraculous. American bonds, once trading at 15 cents on the dollar in Europe, suddenly tripled in value within months. Foreign investors poured money into U.S. securities. The Bank of the United States, Hamilton's next great project, was born soon after, creating a stable national currency. Farmers and merchants could borrow again. The states were now economically tied to the federal government, exactly as Hamilton had planned. It wasn't perfect. It deepened the divide between Federalists and emerging Republicans, and it planted the seeds of future sectional conflict. But it worked. America's credit was established forever. The young nation could now fund canals, roads, and the military that would protect its expansion westward. Let's pause and zoom in on some astonishing details that make this story even more incredible. Hamilton's report wasn't just a financial document, it was a masterpiece of economic theory. He drew on the experiences of Britain's funded debt system after the Glorious Revolution, arguing that a well-managed national debt could actually be a blessing. It created a class of investors loyal to the government and provided liquidity for commerce. He proposed specific mechanisms, sinking funds, duties on imports from Britain and France, and even an excise on distilled spirits, which later sparked the Whiskey Rebellion. Madison's opposition was rooted in principle. He feared consolidation would destroy states' rights and reward speculators who had gambled on the soldiers' suffering. The debates in the House stretched for months, with speeches lasting hours. One congressman from South Carolina dramatically warned that assumption would prostrate the liberties of the people. Yet Hamilton's vision prevailed because of raw political genius and that fateful dinner. Jefferson later admitted he had been duped into supporting it, but he also recognized that without the deal, the government might have collapsed. The assumption not only saved credit, it literally held the Union together during its most vulnerable years. By 1792, U.S. bonds were trading at or above par in London. Foreign bankers who had scoffed at the rebel republic now begged to lend money. This financial foundation allowed America to weather the War of 1812, expand across the continent, and eventually become the world's largest economy. Think about the human stories behind the numbers. Veterans like Elias Smith finally received fair value when speculators cashed in, though many still felt cheated. Northern merchants thrived, but Southern planters grumbled about new federal taxes. Hamilton himself became a hero to financiers and a villain to strict constructionists. Washington stood above the fray, trusting his former aide's judgment. The assumption of state debts was the first great test of the Constitution in action, and it passed with flying colors. This story is filled with surprises: how debt became America's greatest asset, how three brilliant but very different men, Hamilton, the immigrant visionary, Madison, the scholarly Virginian, and Jefferson, the elegant diplomat, forged a compromise over wine and roast beef that still echoes today. It shows that even in the earliest days, America was a nation of deal-makers and dreamers. Hamilton's plan didn't just pay bills, it created the financial architecture that let the United States grow from 13 struggling states into the beacon of liberty and prosperity we know today. As we wrap up this epic journey through one of the most pivotal and least talked about moments in American history, I want to hear from you. What kind of historical story would you like next? The dramatic tale of the Louisiana Purchase, the intrigue behind the Constitutional Convention, the untold story of the Whiskey Rebellion, or maybe something about the women who shaped the early republic? Drop your ideas in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'll create the next video based on what you want. Thank you so much for watching, for learning, and for loving American history as much as I do. Stay curious, stay proud, and may God bless the United States of America. Until next time, take care and keep exploring the incredible true stories that built our nation. Goodbye, friends.